And can we go to the slide deck, please? And today is December 7th. Again, welcome to the ECE CalFTPA Field Test Informational Webinar. Oh, Lori, one moment. Is this the correct? Okay, I just want to make sure we have the correct deck. They were labeled a little differently. I just want to make sure we have the right one.
This one is labeled Practicum.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. Thank you. Okay, so introductions. Some folks are not with us today, but we'd like to introduce them because they are an important part of the work at CTC or ES. And I'll begin with our Chief Deputy Director at CTC, Amy Rising. She is traveling today to be present for tomorrow and Friday's commission meeting, but she is the one who leads our professional services division and our whole CTC and our performance assessment development. And Renee Marshall is here. Renee, do you want to say a quick hello?
It is great to see everybody today. Thank you so much. I know it's an incredibly busy time of the year, and so we just appreciate everybody being here today.
Thank you. And Renee is an administrator in professional services division. I am Cassandra Henderson, the lead consultant, and I work in performance assessment development, and I'm the lead consultant for the development of the ECE CalFTPA and the upcoming PK3 ECE specialist CalTPA. And I will turn it over to my partner in performance assessment development, Zoltan Zarda.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us for your lunch hour today and for your work with candidates as they move through this process. But it's an exciting time for early childhood, I think. I'm Zoltan Zarda. I'm a consultant with performance assessment development, and I focus on the Gen Ed CalTPA. But given that I was a kindergarten and first grade teacher for many years, I support Cassandra's work and the team's work on the ECE development as well. I'll turn it over to June.
Hi, everyone. I'm June Melovich. I've been really fortunate to be a curriculum content expert for both the CalFTPA and quality peer reviewed design team work. And I am on the side full-time faculty at Saddleback College, Community College, two-year college, and the co-director of the Curriculum Alignment Project.
Thank you, June. And I will turn it over to our contractor, our technical contractor, Evaluation Systems Pearson, Reginald.
Thank you, Cassandra. Can you hear me okay? Am I good?
A little bit. Yeah, it's a little bit distant, but it's okay.
Okay. I don't mean to be distant, but good afternoon, everybody. I'm Reggie Nichols, the Senior Area Director for Evaluation Systems, technical contractor. And it's my joy to be with everyone today and appreciate you taking out some time today. I have two colleagues that are working alongside of me that have been doing yeoman's work. One is Dr. Fred Ramirez. He's not feeling well today, so I don't know how much he's going to say, but I've appreciated being on the call. He's been working with us through the pilot and be working with us through the field test and all that. So Fred, do you want to say hi? Okay. I know he's,
Oh, there he is.
Hey, Fred. So I appreciate you being here, my good brother. And also we have Lori Thornley, our program manager for evaluation systems, who behind the scenes just keeps everything and in front of the scenes keeps everything rolling. Lori, you want to say hello?
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Happy to be here with you today.
Thank you. I'll turn it back over to you, Cassandra.
Thank you. And so for today, we'll talk about some meeting logistics. Again, this webinar is recorded. We'll talk about field test participation. What do you need to know if you'd like to participate in the field test and have your students participate? The ECE CalFTPA format and structure. And we'll have a really neat opportunity for you to talk with your colleagues and learn from them. Colleague collaborative tips that work. And we have Jeannie Veach with us, Carol Gossett, and Sandra Frisbee. Again, this webinar is recorded. Access will be provided to you through a private YouTube link. And slides were provided to you in a PDF. So hopefully everyone received those. If not, we will get them to you. Oh, and there's the link of the PDF, excuse me. Thank you, Zoltan.
You're welcome.
Online norms, please unmute yourself when you'd like to comment or ask a question. At other times, please remain muted so that we can eliminate background noise. Please keep your questions to a general focus rather than program or candidate-specific inquiries. Please avoid multitasking during this webinar to ensure that you hear all of the information presented. And we'd like to honor time for participants and presenters by moderating your questions and comments. And please remember, I'm sure all of us have been in numerous meetings today and throughout the week. Zoom fatigue is real. Please give your eyes a break from time to time. Even looking away from the screen for a couple of seconds will help. Also, if there are times built into this presentation for questions, but you may also type them in the chat and we can respond, or the team will respond as we go along as well.
So across the next few slides, we're going to get a chance to dig in a little bit more to the details of the CalFTPA. And really, what's it about? So it's really designed to measure what our students, our candidates are able to know and do by the end of their programs in preparation for the teacher level permit. And what really sort of sparked my interest in sharing with Practicum instructors particularly is that there's, if you want to move on to the next slide, such a high degree of alignment with what the ECE CalFTPA is designed to measure with the Practicum course student learning outcomes. So you can see on this slide, we've got the 3 student learning outcomes for the Practicum class that are the CAP recommended content, which a majority of the colleges in the state have adopted. And so you can see that in the first, designing and implementing curriculum, all 3 of the cycles include elements of this SLO. So that provides kind of multiple opportunities to check in across the course. The second SLO is applying a variety of teaching strategies, including the classroom, using reflection and thinking about future planning. And cycle 2 of the CalFTPA really utilizes each of those tasks. And in SLO 3, the skills of a professional teacher, responsibilities to families. Cycle 3 of the CalFTPA really includes tasks aligned to that. And so utilizing the CalFTPA as maybe some of your methods of assessment, and maybe you could replace some of them that you currently use. So as you're kind of listening to the cycles described and how faculty have implemented them, I would encourage you to keep the course SLOs in mind to say, oh, where does this fit? What do I do? And where might this be useful and helpful to where I could fit it into my class? It's very similar to what I'm sure many Practicum instructors already include in their courses.
Thank you, June. And there are some benefits to participating in the field test. The ECE CalFTPA can be substituted in your course for a signature assignment or assessment. So you don't have to necessarily add more to the plate of your students. You can actually take something off and use this in place of an assignment. Also, a TPA, it will be a separate one, will be required for the PK3 credential. So if you have students that are planning to get their permit and then potentially seek a PK3 credential, they will already be familiar with this formative assessment cycle and the rubrics. And then before they have the opportunity to participate in the required performance assessment for the PK3 ECE credential, which is going to be developed. And I'll turn it over to our technical contractor at ECE.
Yeah, thanks, Cassandra. So we want to just talk through some of the requirements. We appreciate everybody being on the call. If you haven't already signed up to participate, we'll talk about that. But these are some of the requirements for the formative TPA, the ECE Cal formative TPA field test participation. We expect that candidates in the field test must be in settings where they're able to engage in-person and or synchronous instruction with children. So this is important for us as we go through the cycles. The candidates should have a placement in a classroom with children ages 3 to 5. Another important element requirement is have a minimum of 2 weeks in their placement per cycle. The field test runs for about 8 weeks, and each cycle takes about 2 to 4 weeks to complete. So we are requiring that the participants have a minimum of 2 weeks. They have a placement in a state preschool, Title V or Title 22 licensed setting, Head Start or transitional kindergarten. Family childcare settings and before and after school settings are not eligible for this field test. And programs interested in participating, you should, thank you for putting it in the chat. There's a form to complete if you're interested in participating. We're trying to get as many programs to participate in this exciting work that we are doing. Next slide. So the participation process, the field test contact person will serve as the main contact for all the updates and any information that we will be sending out. All participating program candidates or the students are all welcome to participate. So if you have students in your program, all of them are welcome to participate. A target number of candidate submission will be scored. So just so you know, all the candidate submissions won't be scored, but just a target number will be scored. The candidates will not receive their scores, but the programs will receive aggregate field test score results. And the field test contact person, faculty, and candidates, we're going to get feedback, as we did in the pilot. We're going to get feedback via surveys and focus groups after the field test. So now I'm going to turn over to Lori. She's going to talk about some of the timelines for our work together.
Yeah, to give you a high-level idea for how the field test will play out for those of you who might be interested in participating. We are holding informational webinars. We held one last week. We're holding this one today. We've sort of set an initial program application deadline for the end of this week. Oops, I did not mean to click that slide. I will take my fingers off my keyboard. But by all means, we will continue to accept programs through the end of December and into January, should you decide you want to participate. The reason for the initial deadline is by the end of next week, we plan to send out a program confirmation communication, and in that communication, it will spell out all of the details of the field test and some of the next steps that your program will need to take. That will also include some advanced drafts, and they are very much so drafts, not the final versions of the field test guides, so that you can have those to help set your course syllabi up for the upcoming winter programs. We look to have those sent out by December 16th. You'll see there's a January 20th deadline to have candidate lists returned to us. The field test uses vouchers, which are basically an alphanumeric code for candidates. They will use those codes to register within the Pearson ePortfolio submission system, and those vouchers will allow them to bypass the registration fee system, because of course we aren't going to charge anybody for participating in this field test. So they will need to have these voucher codes in order to register, to submit their cycles. And we're asking to have your candidate list by January 20th. Again, should you not be able to provide your list by that date, that doesn't mean you can't participate. We'll still continue to accept lists after the 20th. It just means we might not be able to process your vouchers by the February 7th system launch date. We'll definitely get them to you, but we might need to take a day or two to get those processed for you. We will be holding, as you can see, on February 2nd, a kickoff webinar that is intended to walk you through the actual submission system. We'll be doing a demo of the registration and field test submission system so that you will be familiar with it, so that you can then share or assist your candidates as needed. Again, those systems will launch on February 7th. That is the start date or technical start date for the field test. We're looking to hold a midpoint webinar somewhere around March 8th, currently targeting March 8th. That's intended as just sort of a check-in to see how it's going, give you an opportunity to ask questions. But Cassandra will be talking a little bit later about office hours as well. So we will provide multiple means of support for you to assist you as you assist your candidates in participating in the field test. The deadline for the field test will be April 7th. We do need to have a deadline so that we can collect all of the submissions and then proceed with the next phase, which will be scoring all of those assessments. We will also be reaching out to all of the programs, field test coordinators, candidates, and any and all staff who may have participated in supporting candidates, asking you to please participate in some focus groups and surveys at the conclusion of the field test. This helps to give us, in addition to the score data, which of course, the hard score data from candidate submissions, this helps to also give us some qualitative data that we can use to analyze the field test and make revisions prior to operational deployment. And then, as Reggie mentioned, we will be able to provide aggregated score reports to programs in June. So that's a high-level look at the timeline.
Thank you, Lori. This, the ECE CalFTPA has 3 learning cycles. The first one is observing young children. The second one focuses on planning learning activities. And the third one focuses on building family partnerships. I do want to share a few things that are different about the CalFTPA from the other performance assessments the CTC has created. This particular performance assessment will be formative, and so it will be administered in the early childhood educator programs for folks who are seeking the teacher level permit, and it will be scored locally rather than centrally through our contractor. Also, this assessment has 3-level analytic rubrics. You will have a chance to see one in just a bit, a few more slides, and rather than a 5-level rubric. So let's delve into the cycles. We will share a bit about what the candidates do for each cycle, and then we will delve into the cycle 1 guide. Please know that the structure of each of the guides for each of the cycles is the same. The instructions might be different and they're doing something different, but the structure of the guides are the same. So we will delve into the cycle 1 guide after I share with you what the candidates will be doing. And here we are with cycle 1, observing young children. In this cycle focuses on observation. In this cycle, the candidate will select 1 focused child, and they will do this with the help of their supervising mentor teacher with their guidance. The focused children can be fit into any one of 3 descriptive categories. It could be a child who is has a different primary language than English and is learning English. It can be a child who has an IEP or a child who has some additional needs of support to access the curriculum. It can be a child who you're curious about Focus child, can be a child you're curious about, a child who needs extra support, a child who seems very advanced for their age, the child that stays on your mind when you drive home from work, that child. The candidate will conduct an observation of the focus child engaging in a learning activity. And there is a template that they will complete. They will fill out an observation template and answer some questions, provide information, and they will make an initial interpretation of those observation notes. They will then discuss what they found with their supervising mentor teacher, and that is to mitigate bias. They will also seek some information from other existing sources about the child. It could be the child's drawings or writing, talking, it could be something a parent shared at pickup, communication, behavior, and they will then conduct a second observation of the same child engaging in a different learning activity. Then they will compare their notes and observations from the first observation to the second. The candidate will then reflect on what they learned through observing the child twice in a preschool setting with peers and other support personnel, and they'll compare their notes and interpretations to at least 2 supporting sources of evidence. And then they will discuss, they will apply what they learned during the cycle to inform what they could offer as a next step activity for the child. And we will take a look at this guide. Okay, here's cycle 1. Learning cycle 1, observing young children. Each of the guides has a picture of young children on the cover. There's a preamble. In all of the guides, it's the same. We can keep scrolling, please. Table of contents. The acknowledgements are the same in each guide. And then there's an overview. This is really important information for the candidate. This overview tells the candidate what they're focusing on in each of the learning cycles, why it's important. And you'll notice there's a graphic here. Each of the cycles has a graphic, but the main course of this work is plan. This one is observe and record, reflect and apply. So that is the cycle they're following within the 4 steps in this learning cycle. Okay, you'll see a lavender colored box here. That's called a call out box, and they are throughout the document. That's information that says to the candidate, hey, stop here, this is important, take a look at this. And so that just kind of calls out some important information. If we keep scrolling, you will also see the same graphic I just shared with you, the flow chart of what your students will be doing. And if we keep going, there's some information on universal design for learning. And then there is a section that gives pedagogy resources for the students. So where you see the blue underlined, that's a hyperlink. They can click on that and go directly to those documents. Okay. And it lists the California Preschool Learning Foundations, all of the volumes. It also notes the transitional kindergarten and kindergarten implementation guide and standards, because the focus of these learning cycles are your students will be working with children who are ages 3 to 5 years old. Here is the evidence table. Lori, are you able to make it just a little bit bigger? I don't know if will it fit? Thank you. On this evidence table is a snapshot for the student of what they're going to need to complete in this cycle. So on the far left, it tells you the cycle steps. Step 1 is plan. In the middle, it tells them what they need to do. This is where in the planning step, they will gather contextual information about the whole group of children, and they will choose the one focused child from that group of children and with their supervising mentor teacher's guidance. On the far right, it tells them what evidence are they submitting that they've completed this step. So in this case, for step 1, there is a template called Part A, written narrative, getting to know the children, and focus child, and they will complete that. The templates will be provided. They are not ready yet, but they will be ready in time for when the field test begins, but they are still being developed, the templates. The guides that you're seeing right now, since this question may come up, this guide will be provided to you, the one that you're seeing now, if you sign up for the field test. We will provide an early draft copy. It is a draft. It may change slightly by the time we begin the field test, but this would give you something to plan your instruction with for the upcoming semester so that you can get this into your syllabus before the semester begins. So you would be able to have this draft watermarked copy to work from, and then you would get any updates before the field test begins. They would be minor updates. Okay, and then this evidence table notes the steps, what the candidate needs to do and what they will submit for each of the 4 steps. Here you see where it says step 1 plan. There is a section like this for each of the 4 steps. And this is where the candidate gets much more in-depth directions on what to do, what questions and prompts to respond to, and how to do it. The evidence table we just looked at is a brief snapshot. This goes into much more depth about what they need to do and complete. It's very detailed directions. And so we can kind of scroll through this. Thank you. And this is where they begin in step 1 with gathering contextual information. And this section exists for each of the steps, giving that detailed information on what they need to do. Okay, we can keep scrolling down to the essential questions, please. Okay, here are the essential questions. In the rubrics that will be used to score the candidate submission, each rubric is tied to an essential question, and here are the essential questions. There are 5 rubrics for this particular learning cycle, and there's a question that guides each of the rubrics. And then we will actually take a look at a rubric. Zoltan will guide us through that in just a bit. And then at the end, there is a glossary for any terms. So you see a term there under essential questions of rubrics. That hyperlink takes the candidate to that term in the glossary. And I will turn it over to Zoltan for Learning Cycle 2.
Okay, so for Learning Cycle 2, we're just going to look at the overview because again, as Cassandra noted, the guides are almost identical in structure and having that overview and leading to the step-by-step and the rubrics at the end. So if we look at what candidates will be doing in Cycle 2, this is where they're planning a learning activity. And we actually, one of the hallmarks of Cycle 2 is that we actually get a peek into their classroom settings because they record their teaching. So similar to Cycle 1, they're going to select focus students. It's the same categories of student that they can select, but for this one, they will select 3 different students, one with each of those categories that Cassandra outlined. Again, they're providing contextual information about the class, that idea that good teaching is based on really understanding who the students you have in your class and what their assets and learning needs are. They're going to then look at some observation data that they can pull that over from Cycle 1 if they've done that, or do an observation of the students. And they're going to develop one activity, which is either a math activity or a literacy that's standards. And then they're going to provide that plan makes sense for their students, for their children.
Zoltan, you froze on that last section. Sorry.
Am I back?
Yes, you're back, but you froze on the last one. So I don't know if you want to repeat any of that.
All right. So again, they're going to use that assessment data and develop that one math or literacy activity, and it's based on California standards. And then key to all this is that they provide a rationale for what they're going to do with their student, for the children, and why they're doing that. It's that idea of we're really highlighting intentional teaching practice here. Now, once they have planned that, they go into the classroom and they record the entire activity. From that, they pull out 4 separate video clips of up to 5 minutes each. And in those 4 separate video clips, they're going to demonstrate how they create the positive and safe learning environment, how they engage children in active learning, how they establish those expectations for learning, and how do they check for understanding. Again, all this is good practice, what teachers do every single day with children. They're then going to annotate, explain what is seen in each of those video clips and why, and how they relate to those 4 prompts. And then again, as with all the FTPAs, they reflect on what happened. That idea that teaching is a highly reflective practice, and there's always differences between what you planned and what happened. So they reflect on that, and then they think about what they would do for next steps for this particular group of students learning. And again, we're not going to go into the guide because it's really identical in format and has those step-by-step instructions for each of these pieces that they will be engaged in. And I'll turn it back to Cassandra.
Okay, thank you. So cycle 3, next slide, please, is building family and guardian partnerships. This one is my favorite. In this cycle, the candidate will select one focus child, and they will provide context for the group and that focus child. They will consult with their supervising mentor teacher and choose a math or literacy focused activity opposite of cycle 2. And they will be able to observe that lesson that their supervising mentor teacher teaches, co-teach with their supervising mentor teacher, or teach the lesson themselves. And they will plan and engage in a first connection with the focus child's family guardians to describe the in-school activity and to learn from that family guardian about the child's cultural and linguistic assets and their experience with mathematics and or literacy, depending on which lesson focus, activity focus they've selected. They will then observe and or co-teach or teach that lesson, and then record notes about the focus child's involvement. They will develop an out-of-school activity to build on the in-school activity learning goals for the focus child. And then they will plan and engage in a second connection with the family guardians to discuss how the focus child experienced the in-school activity, introduce and explain the out-of-school activity, and invite the family guardians to share information about the child and their hopes for their child and what they see at home. They will then, the family will take that activity and they will complete that. They will then plan, the candidate, to engage in a third connection with the family guardians to find out how the child and family guardians experience that out-of-school activity. In step 3, they will then reflect on the effectiveness of that out-of-school activity for the child and for the family guardians. And then in step 4, they'll apply what they learned and talk about whether they needed to extend that activity or revise that activity for the child to help them meet their learning goals. And again, the guide structure is the same for cycles 1, 2, and 3, even though the focus of each cycle is different. I know that was a lot of information. Are there any questions about the cycles before we show you one of the rubrics? I'll check the chat. I don't see any hands up. Okay, I don't see any hands. I don't see anything in the chat, so we will move forward. And I'll turn it over to Zoltan to share about the rubrics.
And so each of the cycles comes with a set of rubrics. The rubrics measure each of the steps that we described for each of those cycles. And they're slightly different than we might typically see with sort of a holistic rubric that might be used in much of classroom practice. But really the rubric design, they're designed to really provide feedback to the candidate and to you as well in terms of thinking about how candidates are performing. So again, as Cassandra said earlier, the essential question is at the top of each rubric. So this is rubric 1.5, which applies to step 4, the apply step in cycle 1. So the essential question for this particular rubric is there. And then there's the 3 levels of performance, as Sandra noted earlier. And on these particular rubrics, level 2 is seen as the expected level of performance. So what happens there is we take the essential question and deconstruct it into level 2. And so each of those paragraphs in each of the levels are what we call a construct, which is a particular aspect of the essential question. So in scoring this, if a candidate gets there's evidence for both or all three constructs in level 2, then the assessor would go and to see if they are at a level 3. And if both of those constructs would be met, there's evidence for both of those constructs in the submission, then that rubric would be scored a level 3. If one of the constructs is missing for level 2, then the assessor would look at level 1, and the submission would receive a 1 on that particular rubric. There are sources of evidence that can be applied to each of the rubrics. Some of them have multiple sources of evidence. This one has only 1. And then the TPEs and elements that are measured by or assessed by this rubric are there. If we can go to the next slide, and again, just looking at the structure. So again, the 3 levels. And if we go to the next one, so again, here's this level 2. This is just a detail of how you can see that the central question is divided into separate constructs. So each level has 1 or more constructs that the assessors will be looking for evidence for in the submission. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Cassandra, I believe.
Okay. Are there any questions about the rubrics before we give you a chance to hear from your colleagues? I'm looking, I don't see any hands up. I don't see anything in the chat. Okay. It is my great pleasure to be able to introduce to you 3 of your colleagues. We have Jeannie Veach here from Shasta College, and we have Carol Gossett and Sandra Frisbee here from Fresno Pacific University. All 3 of your colleagues participated in the pilot test, and they are here to share some tips and advice of what worked well for them in the pilot and what may work well for you in the field test. And before I turn over to Jeannie, I will address one thing that may come up or that people have asked about in the webinar we did last week. And that was about adapting these site learning cycles for the field test to Canvas, which is a system that I know the community colleges all use. The CTC is looking into that. That is not something that is determined definitely for this time. So I just wanted to address that in case that came up or people were wondering about that, but we are looking into it and exploring that option. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Jeannie, and then Carol and Sandra. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me. First off, I just want to do a shout out to Carol and her team because we did work closely together in the beginning, creating the flyer, creating the consent form, making sure that we had our ducks in a row, and then we just kind of went our separate ways and just kind of did our thing. So I'm going to share with you just what I put together in our, let me see if it'll let me share.
Lori, can you make Jeannie, Carol, and Sandra co-hosts?
Yep.
Oh, will it let you? Okay, good.
Yep, it let me. So I set up in Canvas the cycle 3. I'm going to share cycle 3 because that was my pilot that I provided last spring of 22. And I basically did a lot of using the language from the guides to kind of set the students up, but I also provided them with the entire guide. And the feedback that I received from the students is it was a lot. It was a lot of information. So what I did was I made them a copy and gave it to them in class. And they just said that was so much in the very beginning. So this semester in fall 2022, I went over the more simplified directions first, and then I put it in there as a link. So that way they could go to that guide. Some students just felt like too much information on the forefront was overwhelming. And I also put the consent form there for them to, after they talk with their mentor teacher on the family that they choose after the activity, and the parent flyer for them to use. And then I did the same thing under each step. So there's 4 steps to cycle 3. And so in the observe and plan, I put a link here where they could simply click on it and it would take them to the directions for observe and plan. And I don't know if it moved over, if you could see that or not. Good. And then I again took from the guide and broke down the directions a little bit more here. And then I provided the templates, and they could click here on the template itself and it would take them into the template for them to complete. So then that way I didn't, they had that full direction there. And with each step, I added an informational video. So under Observe and Plan, they have the directions, they have the a link to further directions, they had the templates, and they had a video on how to complete that first step. What I'm finding, and the feedback I have received this semester, is my students would like deadlines for each of the steps. So instead of doing this very lengthy assignment, they were like, we would like, maybe because they have 3 weeks to complete it, maybe week 1, I do a Q&A when I describe the assignment so that they can ask questions within Canvas. So a week before it even starts, they get a description and a Q&A. And then when I actually give them the assignment, they have the 2 weeks. So they essentially have 3 weeks. But this was just my way of informing them and then practicing with them. What does that look like? What does that observation look like? It was in last semester, it was 3 children that we chose in cycle 1 and cycle 2. I'm so happy that it went to 1. So that makes it a little bit nice. So, but in cycle 3, it was just 1 child that they had to choose that activity. So in step 2, the design and connect, again, you get the directions, you get the templates, and then you have a video telling you how to design and connect this to the focus child that you have chosen with your mentor. And then the templates give you direction, and it also tells you how many pages it should be. And believe me, these are super lengthy and really take some time for the instructor to be giving that formative feedback, which I didn't do a lot of in the spring, because you'll have a guide on, as an instructor, what kind of feedback you can give to students before they upload it to the state. So it is a little bit different. And here we are in step 3. We have the reflective practice, their template, the directions, their template, and a video, again, just to kind of walk them through what that looks like, and giving them some guidance to support them. And then in their application. And for my students last spring, one of the shifts in my teaching went from, not only do you have reflection, you also have application. And I'm starting to do that throughout my courses. Reflection and application are 2 very different things, and it took me a while to kind of wrap my head around that. But it's really come to fruition now and helped me. And then I also have the TK guide and the content standards. And also this was embedded using the CAP slows in my syllabi. So I use that information, right? So the students knew this was coming. I do a week by week in my syllabi as well, in my syllabus as well. So students know exactly when things are due at the beginning of the semester. And again, a full-on video of the entire project so that they can I give them guidance. And the reason I do videos is because after a conversation in class, everybody has questions. It just happens. And so that's just my way to support all my students and all my learners. So that's my Canvas in a nutshell. I think in the future, my hope is when we start creating these for the state, like I know June was talking about doing a Canvas for instructors, so it's more consistent. It would be nice to have these chunked into smaller assignments. That's all I have.
Jeannie. Thank you, Jeannie. Thank you very much. And as Jeannie just mentioned, Canvas as a potential option in the future, the state is exploring that. That is not a definite yet. We are researching that option. But thank you for all of those resources. And I'd like to turn it over now to Carol and Sandy. There you are, Sandy. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Let's see if you see my screen yet. Are you? Okay, good. Well, we don't use Canvas at Fresno Pacific. We use Moodle, not Noodle, but Moodle. So Sandy and I have already put cycle 3 into a Moodle shell. We approached this a little bit differently because our course schedules did not align with the CalTPA schedule. We start our class in January and the pilot didn't start till February, and we needed to get those students started right away. So we created a new course that they could take for 1 unit that we were able to draw from students that were enrolled in several different classes, all our observation class, but in several different cohorts. And those that volunteered came in to this course as well, which the university gifted to those students who participated. We will not be doing that, I don't think, for cycle 3, for this next field test, but the students had to work so hard above and beyond the classes that they were in. We felt we owed them a unit. So we gave them a free unit. We had quite a few students enroll originally and ended up with 8 that completed the program. But so this Moodle shell is devoted entirely to CalTPA cycle 3. We automatically build in a resource center for every guiding documents you could ever need for anything you do in early childhood. So our TK, our preschool learning foundations, Common Core are already there for every one of our templates. So then students met with us on a Friday. Can you believe it? A Friday evening every week in order to get instruction. They were really dedicated. And they just, I hope we're not in trouble for using some of your graphics that we picked up off of your materials, but we did.
You're good, Carol. You're good.
Well, we'll ask for forgiveness. And so that they would see the cycle that we were involved in. They were able to just simply go through and complete the assignments. We recorded every session. I agree with Jean. The students need to be able to go back and hear it again. When we had PowerPoints, we included those for them. Here's session 3. I don't think I have all the sessions on here, but I agree with Jean. There was too much information for the students in the guide. So Sandy, Dr. Frisbee and I broke that apart and put it into smaller chunks so that the students wouldn't be overwhelmed, especially when they're working on another class at the same time. So that's what we've done here. These assignments they have full, explanations behind them, but it just takes them through the process. We did not have access to a family brochure, so we made one ourselves. Let me see if this is showing. Let's see if it's going to come up. Yeah, here it is. Can you see it, or did it?
No, we don't see it yet.
Okay, let me stop share and go back over. You know how that does sometimes.
Yeah, that's Zoom.
That's Zoom, all right. Okay. This is a flyer that Sandy and I made up so that the students would be consistent, and it just tells the families what the family needs to do, what cycle 3 is, and what's going on. The students could fill in, contact your student educator at, or etc. We wanted to keep this consistent. We didn't want to just give this to the students to willy-nilly do. We wanted the information to all be clear and that they could contact us if they had any information or any questions that they needed. We had this done in English, Spanish, and believe it or not, Punjabi. One of our participating students was working with Punjabi children and families, so we have that available, and we are happy to share that if you'd like. Let me go back to this. Screen 1. And then we have, okay, let's see. So yeah, we've got all those listed for them. Then, what happened during the activity or lesson observation and selecting the focus child and the review of the project to date. That one was a big one for us. We really wanted the students to check in with us and give us a good review of that. That was a 100-point assignment. They knew that that was important, that we really wanted to know what was going on. And then the next module, connecting with families, that's what cycle 3 is all about. There were several steps in there for them to do. We have a consent form that we developed in Spanish and in English, because originally we were not given those consent forms, and we need to cover us legally. So we have those available. If anybody would like, we can share those as well. And then just all the directions that, for each one that might come up, just set up just like an assignment, and it just gives the instructions. Again, we got these off our guides. That's where we, gave the information. So let me go back. Let's see. I want to tell you that, then the last one was what will, module the last week submitting to CalTPA, to CTC. But you need to realize that this is a moving target in some ways. It's a pilot, it's a field test. That is the importance, or that is what's needed for a field test, for it to be nimble and just keep abreast of everything that comes from the commission, so that if a change has been made or a revision. And Sandy and I were on those constantly. We went to every webinar. We listened, we saved the transcripts so we could go over them again. So please know that it's worthwhile. Our students were so thankful for the experience. We got nothing but positive feedback from it. We have enrolled in cycle 1 and 2. We did 3 last time. And you're going to make a good decision to do this, if nothing else, to inform you for future things that are to come. So if anybody has any questions or wants us to share any of that, Sandy is here to kind of monitor the chat and see if I need to answer anything. But other than that,
yeah, I don't see any questions.
okay.
No questions, but a lot of thank yous. And what you and Sandy created, what you created, Jeannie, it's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing with your colleagues. And if you can forward any of the documents that you're willing to share with us, we can distribute those when we send out the email with the, you have the slides, but the recording link of this webinar. Okay. Also, in the interest of time, I want to respect your time. If we can go back to the slides, please, Lori, I want to share supports that the CTC and ES can offer. And when we had the pilot test, I offered weekly office hours for anyone who had questions, for the pilot test programs. I will offer those again for field test programs. I may begin those in mid-January, even though the field test will not have officially begun at that point. We will also have another webinar for any programs who are signed up for the field test. That will be February 2nd, I believe. Is that correct, Lori? February 2nd?
Yes.
Okay. The time and the link for that will be distributed later to those programs that have signed up. I will say again, if your program signs up to participate in the field test, you will be able to receive watermarked draft copies. Again, it will be a draft. Our target date is December 16th. So your program does need to be signed up for the field test to receive those drafts, because we do have to maintain version control. But if your program is signed up to participate in the field test, you would receive those drafts. There's also ongoing support via email, and my email box is empty. No one has emailed me on this email. Please use it. I'm happy to respond. It is ECE CalTPA@ctc.ca.gov. The PSDE news, most of you are subscribed, but there is a link to subscribe to that. That has information about what's happening at the CTC and when we have need for assessors or field tests are coming up or a new development of a new TPA, things of that nature. Also informational and support webinars. We had a webinar on November 30th for programs already signed up for the field test. The webinar we're in right now. We will have a kickoff webinar on February 2nd, and then there will be a midpoint webinar for field test programs, date to be determined. And Lori, just thank you, Lori. She put the PSDE news link in the chat in case you were not already subscribed. The CTC also has a YouTube channel with archived resources. Some are for ECE, but they're also for our other TPAs. And you may definitely access that. And then once the field test begins and it is up and running, our ES will offer a comprehensive field test website with resources and guides. So that was a lot to take in, but my favorite part was colleagues sharing with colleagues. Thank you for that, Carol, Sandra, and Jeannie. I appreciate you so much. And with that, we are able to invite students other than practicum students to participate. Yes, any student who's seeking the teacher level permit can participate. Yes.
And who will be in a placement that will allow them to participate.
Right. So please, again, email me any questions you have. I'm happy to respond. I want to thank you all for being here and taking an interest in this very important work. And we will see you next time. Thank you so much.